Welcome back. We are going back to back with Home Box Office. Another film that I'm very excited to discuss with the filmmakers who are here with their film Mapplethorpe. Look at the pictures. It is directors Fenton Bailey and Randy Barbato. Welcome, good morning.
Good morning.
So nice to have you here.
Great to be here.
As we were just discussing before we went live again, my memory of my first exposure to Robert Mapplethorpe is, as with so many people, a vivid memory for me. And as a young person, understanding about fine art, photography, and now to fast forward the arc and the narrative to this moment, it's a real, I'm so happy that you all and HBO have taken this opportunity to bring Robert Mapplethorpe back into the discussion.
Well, you know, I think he died in 1989, but his presence since his death has only grown. But I think the way we've looked at the work, our understanding of him hasn't really grown much. And we were as surprised as anyone else that there really hasn't been a documentary about him and his work in 25 years.
I mean, he's an artist that sort of has been overexposed but sort of under-revealed. And
nicely.
And I think that in addition to the fact that many people aren't familiar with his actual art, because he was, particularly after his death, you know, his name was so connected to scandal that it sort of became who he was. So we felt it was really important to take a moment, look at the art, and then there's so many other stories connected to Robert Mapplethorpe. I mean, when he first started, photography wasn't really considered a fine art. So there's this amazing story about how the evolution of photography as a fine art.
Largely as a result of his work and his efforts. You know, he knew it wasn't an art, recognized as an art, but was determined to make it that, and succeeded.
And I had not known that he had been a painter with an estimable amount of talent.
Well, I mean, same with us. I mean, watching, because we've looked very closely at his whole body of work, which was an enormous amount. I mean, he was incredibly productive. At his death, the age of 42, he had thousands and thousands of pieces of art, which now most of which live at the Getty and LACMA. But it's really interesting looking at his early work, his paintings, his drawings, how he got into photography, the evolution of how he ended up where he ended up.
You know, even as a high school student, he was drawing the American flag, which was, you know, something he photographed and was his most expensive, the photograph that sold for the highest price. So it's almost like he had this huge body of work, and he was almost doing it all from the very beginning. It's extraordinary.
I read a piece in an article getting ready for our conversation, and it talked about this sort of these two parts of the art and the person, and that the two of you had some experience with the artist that was about his life, about his personal life, about who he was as a strong, dominating maybe personality, but just someone who was three-dimensional and not just those photographs, or not just one monolith of a person.
Well, you know, I think the interesting thing about him is we were in East Village in the 80s, so he was already an art star. We never met him, but in making this film, his presence has almost been like a haunting presence. It's, you know, it's almost as if he never really died. And finding his work and his pictures and his words just really, it just felt like he was kind of like willing the film into existence. So we were just sort of the latest collaborators. You know, he collaborated, you know that name Mapplethorpe, it's so singular.
Yes.
But he was this serial collaborator and intimately collaborated with lots of people. You know, obviously Patti Smith, but David Crowland, Jack Walls, Milton Moore. I mean, so many, his lovers were the source of his art. And even his brother, Edward, you know, who worked with him in the studio and had played such a key role. I mean, Edward is an artist in his own right, and played such a key role in the look of that Mapplethorpe look. You know, perfect look.
Absolutely. And it occurs to me that when you said the spirit and the presence of Robert Mapplethorpe willing this along, that I suppose he might be a little bit outraged that it had taken this long to make this film. Like, really? Nobody yet?
Yes, I think maybe.
Well, you know, I think he was a documentarian.
Absolutely.
I mean, absolutely, he was an artist who used photography. But he himself often said, you know, I look at it as an autobiography, as a documentary. You know, everything he was doing, everything in his life was subject to being turned into art. Even his death, you know, the perfect moment, the final show that caused all the controversy, he planned that show. And he deliberately put the X, Y, and Z, the explicit photographs, the flower portraits together in one cabinet. And he knew full well what that would do. I think he knew he was setting off a time bomb that would have the ultimate effect of making him this recognized, famous artist, that would make him kind of immortal.
Indeed. I've thought about that word, and of course his legacy of work certainly demonstrates that. And I know this is a complete cliche, but 25 years later, here we are. So much has changed. So little has changed.
Yeah.
And the things that he was commenting on are in some ways are still as present in our culture and our society as they were then.
Absolutely. I mean, I know you can Google and you can see fisting and fetish types. You can see all this stuff now. Anyone can see it.
Right. It's everywhere.
But
and yet,
to see those pictures,
the art.
Still, it has an impact, right?
Yeah, no, totally. But I think now we're finally ready to look at some of that imagery and consider it art. I think 25 years ago, I think 25 years almost had to pass before we could sort of reconsider, reframe, and do it in a way where possibly there is no controversy attached.
Indeed.
I mean, certainly, I can't imagine showing this film at Sundance 20 years ago, or even 15. I think there would have been some problems.
Sure. And more to the point of, if you're going to make a documentary film, retrospective examination of Robert Mapplethorpe, blurring out images is not an option. It defeats the entire purpose. So
exactly.
When the time is ready, when the world is right to receive this art.
It's funny, when we were making the film, the title of the film actually comes from Jesse Helms. Jesse Helms was on this House of the Senate floor holding man in polyester suit, which is a photograph of a man in a polyester suit with a black penis hanging out, waving it to the Senate floor, saying, "Look at the pictures, look at the pictures." That's where we came up with the title of the film, and that's what we do in the film. Almost to the extent that when we handed the first cut to HBO, we're like, they're never gonna let us show
Here's
this.
the start of a very long editing journey.
Everything is in this film.
Fantastic.
Everything is there.
Didn't take anything out. It was amazing.
That's wonderful. Gentlemen, I know you have a very busy schedule. I'd love to talk more, but I think I do the right thing by saying thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
We have to talk about when this film will be available to the wider world on HBO.
It's going to be on HBO April 4th.
April 4th.
Yep.
Look for it.
Yeah.
Kudos to Home Box Office for this brave work, and kudos to the two of you for your work and for being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful Sundance.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Cool.
We're going to take a break. We'll be right back with more The Fourth after this.